How are you doing? Welcome, welcome. How do you like episode 5? All right, so let's get into it. My guest, because you're clearly not here for me for sure. He was in HBO's Tremaine and Cinemax The Nick. He plays Ronnie in Showtime's hit show, The Shy. Please welcome Ntare Guma Mbaho Mwine. Yeah? Did I get it?
Ntare Guma Mbaho Mwine.
So I was like 80%.
You're close.
Okay, all right. A lot of practice. So let's just start off with, first, congratulations, season 3.
Yes, we're really grateful to. Yeah.
So what happened, like when it got picked up for season 3, where were you and what were you thinking?
I was with I think he was maybe 5-day-old son. I just had a baby boy.
Congratulations.
So within the week of his birth, I got a season 3 pickup, so I feel beyond blessed and grateful to be here.
Wow, he's special.
Yes.
So let's start with your career. How did you begin starting acting?
I think being an artist is sort of like a curse. It's just something you just do. Sometimes it doesn't even make sense. You just find yourself doing this thing. And when I was in, I think, 2nd or 3rd grade, they did a production of Peter Pan at my school, at primary school. And they asked people to get up and audition. And before I realized it, I was up in front of all my friends, like singing some Peter Pan song. I didn't get the role of Peter. I played a pirate, but that was my first, it was like a magnet, something that pulls you, and I wasn't even aware of, when this thing was in my presence, that I was just drawn to it. And that was the beginning of just sort of playing. And my mom exposed me to a lot of the arts when I was a kid. We lived in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and we'd go to see Swan Lake or a lot of plays or puppet theater, and just that whole world of the imagination and storytelling was always something I was interested in, but I was never the kind of performative kid. Yeah.
So it's destiny, essentially.
No, because my mom took me. There's this. I don't know if anyone's old enough to know this show, Zoom. It was on PBS. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You gonna zoom, zoom, zoom. You gonna zoom. Come on, sing it. So Zoom was filmed in Massachusetts, in Boston. And they had some auditions for kids to be on Zoom because it was partly a children's show. And my mom thought, oh, let me take Ntare to go to audition for Zoom. I haven't told this story before, I don't think. So we get into this room and we all sit in a circle and we're supposed to go around in a circle and tell something interesting about ourselves. And everyone's going and going and going and going. And then it comes to me and they're like, Ntare, what would you like to say? And I just sat there in silence. And they said, Ntare, do you have anything you'd like to share? Okay, Jimmy. That was it. I was but because I was never the kind of there's some of us who are actors who take up a space, who come into a room and they will suck the air out of the room because they are just larger than life. And there's other actors who are like myself, who are more like the fly in the wall, who kind of will disappear into space sometimes, and don't feel comfortable being, grabbing that tension when they're not necessarily performing. So that was me in that space, and that was my first. So it wasn't destiny, because if I would have been cast in Zoom, and we would be talking about Zoom.
So Zoom was, a little bit of a train wreck. However, fast forward, you got your SAG card. Well, he didn't say anything.
She's breaking my heart. You have a bad audition, and then you come on stage and you talk about it. She's like, it was a train wreck.
So take us to how you got to getting your SAG card. What kind of that process and getting to that part.
I think if I recall correctly, my first TV gig was New York Undercover. Is anyone old enough to remember New York Undercover? They're going to they're bringing it back. So maybe they'll bring my character back. I'm pitching it right here. Any of the writers from New York Undercover watching, Mitnick. My character is Mitnick. I played this nerdy lab technician, and that was my first. TV gig.
Now let's get into the show. So you play Ronnie, and essentially you said before you started season 1 or during season 1 that you didn't know if you wanted to play this role because you didn't know if you were going to do it justice, people in Chicago justice. Now we're in mid part of season 2. What's the feedback been like?
Well, I was blown away, and I'm assuming I'm speaking to a group of actors here, or the people who are watching it, and we're often taught or drawn to roles that we feel we own, and you feel you can draw from your own history or background, and it just comes naturally. But this was the first time where I was given an opportunity to do something which was not in my comfort zone. It was completely, I grew up in New England and Cambridge, Massachusetts, or part of my time in Uganda. I didn't know anything about the Southside of Chicago. I didn't know anything about the world. And there's this thing about authenticity where people want something that's authentic, not necessarily good, that happens all the time where they want to find the real deal. And I knew I wasn't the real deal from the South Side of Chicago, so I didn't think I had a shot at the role. But you have to be careful what you wish for, because I've always wanted to do stuff that's challenging me and forcing me out of my comfort zone, and this is it was really careful what you wish for, because my first series regular role on a TV show was something that was not in my comfort zone, and I thought I was gonna completely bomb, and I thought it was bad. Because when I watched it, I didn't believe anything I was doing, and so I was blown away. I hear someone say interesting, because it was interesting for me to see that people didn't experience what I was feeling when I was doing it. So as actors, sometimes you feel like you're in the moment, you feel like you're in the world. So it was interesting for me to be doing something where I was working so much from the outside in. So I wasn't necessarily feeling everything I was saying. I was aware of how I was trying to do it and trying to communicate in a certain way or hit a certain gesture or sort of speech or speech pattern or the way the cadence of the character spoke. But I wasn't aware if it was translating. I don't know if that makes sense. So this was like having an out-of-body experience in a way, because I was kind of watching myself doing something, but not necessarily fully in it. But when you watched it from the outside, some people were like saying it was the best work I'd ever done. So that for me was really challenged my nature of creativity and sort of the creative process. And sometimes you just had to get out of the way and just say the words and let them speak for themselves. Yeah.
So essentially, Ronnie is dealing with PTSD. So in season 1, we saw what happened with the shooting, and then in season 2, we get to know a little bit about his backstory. How did you kind of study for this character, as in particular that PST type situation?
PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. I really just, when I got cast in the show, we were filming like right away. I didn't have time to do the research and understand the world of this role in a way that I would, like if I'm doing a play or for some other TV show that's been on for a while. So I felt like I just dove into the deep end, and without necessarily knowing what the temperature of the water was, how deep it was, I just went, but not as prepared as I wanted to be. And it's just a blessing, really. And I talk about how sometimes when you play tennis with someone who's better than you, your game is elevated. And I felt like, in part because of the writing of the piece, and part because it was taking place in Chicago, and I was playing opposite people like Common or other Chicago actors, that it elevated me in a way. So I basically was stealing from everyone I saw. Everyone, Chicago, male, in the age range of like 40 I was like hovering around them, trying to steal everything I can get. And there was a Curtis Toller who was in this episode 5. He plays the driver of Mr. Perry. So he was a special advisor for the show. So first, he's a brother who had been a gang leader, a former gang leader, and did his time and came out and turned his life around and became mentoring people who had come through the gang life. And not that Ronnie was a gang member in his earlier life, but he understood the world of Chicago, the Southside of Chicago, that I didn't know. And I would literally go to him with my script and say, would you say the lines this way? Or how would you do it differently? And anything he would say that was not on the page, I would scribble it down and go to the writers and go, what do you think of this? And 9 times out of 10, they would be like, yeah, go for it. And so I really was stealing from him. So I got to shout out Curtis Toller, who is for helping me to get close to this world that I wasn't familiar with. And he really took me in. And they wrote a part for him in the season 1, and he had to audition for it. And he came to me, and I coached him. So it was like this is like the Twilight Zone. The guy I'm stealing from to help my character, I have to help him to play himself.
You're successful. You got the role, so that was good. Now here's the thing. In season 1, you mentioned that you got one script at a time. Was it the same thing for season 2, or did you get everything together?
No, actually, what was interesting when we shot with Common, he was only available I think 1 or 2 days to film 4 episodes. So we had 4 different episodes or scenes from the 4 different episodes that we shot in one day, but those scripts for those 4 episodes weren't finished. So I didn't know what happened before or after that moment, or I meet him, or what led up to that. So that's what I was talking about. Sometimes you really need to understand the world or the backstory of the character, but sometimes you don't have that luxury, and you just play that scene. And so that's what I'm talking about in terms of this piece, this working on this show has challenged my nature of creativity and forced me to work in a new way and without a safety net. And not having that safety net, sometimes, fear can take over and you feel limited, or sometimes you don't have that safety net. There's no option but to just fly. You either fall flat or you fly, And I feel lucky to be here talking to you guys on watching season 2, and that we got a season 3 pickup, because I really thought I was going to fall on my face because I wasn't working in that comfort zone that I was so used to, like shooting a scene and not knowing it happened before. What led up to that moment. And really it was about just playing beat by beat, word by word, and not trying to make it too sacred or...
Now, there was one scene in particular I couldn't even watch. I watched, honestly, with my hands covered, the Miss Ethel, when that scene happened. When you read that, did you internalize that as, okay, I'm an actor, I'm gonna do this, or did you internalize that as I'm her grandson? When you saw that, when you read it on the page, how did you feel?
So let's just go back to what I was saying before. I haven't been working from the inside out. I've been working from the outside in. So that's what's so interesting, because you talk about that, that moment clearly tears him apart. But I just when I was reading it, I was like, oh, they're going to use this as a vehicle to get Ronnie out of prison. I was just thinking about it, and so that's what's really interesting to see sometimes, how things resonate, because we're so used to leading with our hearts often, and the question you just asked was leading from the heart. And for me, often it was just finding different ways to access that, but it wasn't starting from there. Yeah.
Now, you had a new showrunner for this season. Was there a difference between season 1 showrunner and this season's showrunner?
Yeah, every creative has their own stamp and outlook, and I think the challenge with season 1 is that the show doesn't exist yet. And so the challenge when we're shooting a pilot, first of all, is that it basically exists in everyone's imagination. It's like a book, and everyone's going to see it differently, and so there's always sort of these creative clashes, and it's only until it ends up on the screen that it becomes real, and then it starts to gain momentum. And I feel like they created great momentum with the first season, and they passed the baton on to someone else. And that was, Elwood Reed was the showrunner from the first season, and he really took me under his wing and was collaborative in the process of developing this character. And he passed the baton. And Ayanna Floyd Davis was the season 2 showrunner, and I got invited to the writers' room for season 2 before we'd even started working, just to meet the new writers. And she said to me, I felt like your character was the least developed from season 1. And I've actually put the most effort in developing your character. Out of everyone else, I felt like I put all of my time and energy really into helping figure out who Ronnie is, what his demons are, what is his North Star, and what is his anchor that's holding him back. And I was blown away because I thought Ronnie was, a pretty central character, but I really understood what she was saying because we never knew about his backstory. We never knew where he came from, what he's, much about his past. And I think that's part of what I had a struggle with in playing the role, because we didn't know much about his past, about where he came from or what he had gone through. We just see him almost at the point of pulling a trigger and then getting shot. And then the repercussions that has, not just on him, but the community around him. So it's just like you hit the ground running, but you don't know where the race began. He's like dropped in. But I think what's so really incredible about the season 2 is that we really get to see, just with the flashbacks we have. And the second half of the season, I really think is really poignant because I think it gets to deal with, you see it in this episode with father and son, the struggles. And there's this sort of I don't know, it's pathological or like this sort of repeated trope about African American men not having male figures or not having father figures. And this show, all the central male characters, you could see that their fathers are absent or not active. Emmett, you see him meeting his father for the first time, and he doesn't have a close relationship with him. Brandon in this episode says his father, I think, died at, I don't know if it was 4 years old or, yeah. Kevin, he's at his father's funeral. He was not close to him. And without giving too much away, we get to see Ronnie's story and struggles with his father. And for me, that was what was really incredible about the season, because we really got to sort of tap into that sort of, that sort of third rail about African American men and their relationship with their fathers. And I think that they did that really well. And it took a woman to do that. Yeah.
All the women are like, yes. Now, do you watch the show along with like when it comes out? And if so, what do you think about the finished project?
I do watch. First season I watched, I was like shadowing to direct, and I was watching like the director's cuts, the producer's cuts, the network cuts, and it was really interesting to see like the different takes, how editing will tell a story and how through different people's eyes it completely transforms the piece. And as an actor, you just realize how helpless you are because it's out of your hands. And I think that's part of what makes working without a safety net much easier, because you realize there's so much out of your control that they're going to make your performance in the editing room. There might be certain lines that are cut that you said they're gone, or there might be a certain, they might cover somebody in a different way, so whatever ends up on the screen, it's really and truly, everyone tries to say this is not, it's one person, the creative or the producer or the actor, but this is the most collaborative art form there is. But we don't talk about that because, when the awards come up, they single out one person, But this is the most collaborative creative art form, is film and television.
So how do you decompress after such a challenging role?
It's not it doesn't take me out inside, I think the challenging thing really is just like the physical, that if anyone saw the first episode of season 2 where Ronnie's working out, that was hard.
Training for that?
I worked my ass off because I was like, I'm not going to be a chump.
So that was all you.
So that, the hardest really thing for me was the physicality because, Ronnie is a lot leaner and, like 20 pounds lighter than my comfort zone. Like after we finish filming, I easily put on 15, 20 pounds and I'm trying to get closer back to like that so it's not such a stretch. But I felt like he's like Bruce Lee. He's just lean and like a firecracker. And so I think part of the challenge for me was like trying to maintain that throughout for 4 months, which is, yeah.
Now, do you think or do you hope that Ronnie finds peace eventually? Because it seems like he's still struggling. Even if he does find a new love, like there might be, some struggles.
Well, it's a drama. So with drama, there has to be struggles. So if we want to keep Ronnie interesting, I think there's always going to be some give and take, some struggle, some point of tension, because that's where dramatic twists and turns happen. And I think what's really interesting about this season is that we see Ronnie, we see the potential. But, there's a comedian, I don't remember who she is, but she's like, I'm tired of brothers with potential.
Some more.
So I think we get to see the potential, but then it's so hard because you want him to succeed, but then that there's, it might not always work out the way he wanted, but you still root for him, even though he might not do the right thing. And I think that's where the most interesting characters are. Not the saints, but the sinners. Yeah.
Now, so we have a question from somebody in the audience, AJ Clark. So they asked, what show are you watching?
I gotta interrupt you first of all, because that's my student. I have to have a disclaimer. I teach at USC.
Where are you, AJ?
And AJ is my student, former USC student. So I teach at USC in the grad acting program, and I send an e-blast out to some of the folks to come. And his final exam week, he's already graduated. He graduates next week, actually. So
congratulations and thanks for coming out and for your question.
And he managed, because he's a random selected, no?
Kind of, sort of, yeah.
Sort of, I planted a seed, I made him be sure they picked it. But yeah, sorry, I interrupted.
So the question is, what shows are you watching other than The Chi?
Oh, good question. What shows am I watching? Well, I have a 2-year-old daughter and now 8-day-old kid. So I haven't watched anything. I haven't watched anything in ages, but Atlanta, I was hooked on Atlanta, and I think I could watch that over and over. Black Mirror was another show. this is also me pitching to be on these shows. But I love sort of mind-bending storytelling, because we work together. I had these guys create mind-bending work. That's what I'm interested in.
So you asked about The Chi and Atlanta, and what are the similarities and differences for them?
Well, the similarities is that we're looking into worlds that we don't often get to see on screen. And we're getting to see folks in their sort of everyday life. The other sort of similarity, I guess you'd say, like The Wire, but that was really about the drug. It was about a specific, struggle, whereas about Atlanta is sort of about the things that are mundane in life, but the sort of magical things that happen out of the mundane. And what I think I've heard good feedback about The Chi is that you just get to see sort of these everyday folks, but living under extraordinary circumstances. And what was so great about just tonight's episode, the 5th episode for season 2, for some people who are watching, was just seeing black people at a swimming pool having fun.
Just everyday life.
I was like, I hadn't seen that. I'm 52 years, I'll be 52. I was like, yeah, it just took me back to my childhood, and but that was magical, and that I think those are things that transcend sort of boundaries, because everyone has been to a pool or experienced some pool party, but sometimes you don't think that other people do that as well. And so when you see that's what's so great about, just the internet and stuff, is that you see that other people are living their lives doing mundane, different things, and it's great. Yeah.
I think the diversity, the fact that with Atlanta, The Chi, like you're seeing black folks of different complexions. That's like one thing. And then you're seeing them do different things, and it's just not that stereotype. Like, oh, that's, Bobby from the block. If you see them from one show, and like, okay, well, he just does that. Now you're just seeing the characters flushed out. And now you can see yourself in certain characters. So that's what makes these shows great, because we are not, I think, no matter who you are, everybody has either a crazy aunt or a drunken uncle, whether you're black, white, Asian, whatever. So I love the fact that showcases that, and also showcases with Ronnie that, like, the ups and downs, versus you could have just had Ronnie on one episode on some other show and that would have been it. So another question that AJ has is, what sort of material excites you?
What sort of material excites me is thank you, AJ. AJ is still trying to get extra credit points. Don't worry, bro, you're going to graduate. It's okay. What excites me really is stuff is working with people that challenge me and take me out of my comfort zone. And that sometimes is terrifying. But that's what I try to do in the class with AJ, is try to take people out of their comfort zone, give them stuff that's scary to do. But careful what you wish for, because that's sort of what this did for me. And continuing to work with really interesting people. Steven Soderbergh I'd worked with on The Nick, and that for me was one of the most exciting experiences, of working on Treme with Eric Overmyer and David Simon. So getting to work with some of the best and the brightest in their business, in their field. And what's so really amazing is when you get to do that, you realize that they're not working in isolation, that they have an army around them. Like the David Simons and the Eric Overmyers and the Steven Soderberghs have people like 20, 30, 40, 50 people deep that they run with, that they've been working with for years. And so there's this whole sort of romantic notion that there's this one, shining armor, knight in shining armor, or princess, whatever. It's really an army. And once you find that's what's so great about being in grad school, you find your sort of collective, or you having your own community of actors, because that's really what it is about. is having people that you can bounce ideas off of and collaborate with, because nothing happens in a vacuum. And that's what's so great about, I know what we're talking about, these shows like Atlanta, and Donald Glover has an army. His brother he writes with, the editor, the guy who's directing, Hero, they've worked with together for ages. It's not, we all focus on Donald Glover, and he's brilliant. I'm not saying I'm taking anything away from him. But he's got, when you look at the bands, Miles Davis played with Coltrane and played with all these incredible musicians. But we talk about Miles Davis or, Duke Ellington, but these guys all had an incredible group of people they were working with. And if you have someone that you can talk to about your craft, that's the beginning of your army. That's the beginning of your people. And don't take that for granted. Work it. Yeah.
That was like my next question, but I think you answered it. What's your advice to actors as far as the struggle?
Well, I think the struggle is sometimes being an actor is a curse. It's like you just got to do it, even when it doesn't make sense. There's some people who paint in their garage on the weekends, and they just do it for fun. And they keep their garage door open, or they paint in their basement, and nobody really sees their stuff, but they just love to do it. And that's what I felt like for me being an actor, was like, it's just something I love to do, and it's like a moth to a flame. But I feel like I've been fortunate that I've been able to sort of make a living out of it. But there's been times where I haven't been working, but I'm still creating, I'm still shooting my own work. And as actors, you have a studio like in your pocket now. You're like a film studio in your pocket. You have the means to produce, to edit, and to distribute. You have a production studio in your pocket with your cell phones. And Soderbergh is doing that. He's directing films on his cell phones now. This film he just did on Netflix, the basketball. Yeah, I think he shot on an iPhone. Yeah. So, hello. There's no excuse like I had to wait till I get this equipment, or I had to get this $10 million budget. I can't do. Tangerine, of course. Yeah.
So last question, what role do you want to play that you haven't played as yet?
Oh, that's a great pitch. There's so many things. I have my manager here, Lisa, so I would almost let's give her a clap. She probably is like, oh, if we could just say this project, we would be
She's
okay.
awesome. She came in and she's like, let's break down the name. Let's get it. So shout out to Lisa.
So I would love to work on Coming to America too. Because that was such a classic film that's been so, it hasn't got its true, appreciation. And as a first generation African, I've come to America. I feel like this is a role I own. Anything they give me in that, I'd be like. But really, I think anything that sort of takes me out of my comfort zone, because that was something that would be in my comfort zone. But I really think that something that takes me out of my comfort zone, like I did with this, that I get to surprise myself, would be really something that I'd love to do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And Ntare.
TK.
Yes.
But tell everyone your full name so they really understand.
I was giving Ntare credit because my full name is Turquase, and when I went to college, they were like, you have a choice. We can either call you TK or we can call you Toronto, because that's where I'm from. And I was like, I'll go with TK. So it's like much respect for making people learn your name. So.
And thank you all for coming.
Thank you, guys.